There's a term which we mentioned very often, a Hebrew term, that creation is yesh mi'ayin. Literally means something from nothing. What we refer to ex nihilo. Before creation, nothing existed. And even when we speak about nothing, we can't relate or fathom what nothing is, because even what we could visualize, when nothing is a vacuum of void, that's part of creation. That means all that existed pre-creation was God himself. And what's God? God's not fathomable because God is infinite. God willed an existence. So we spoke about the energies, and the energy manifests itself into physicality, and the physicality is determined by the type of energy, whether it's vegetation, whether it's a circulatory system, whether it's a neurological system. It's all dependent based on the energies which are released. Different species, domesticated, undomesticated, each one having its unique form and purpose, so on and so forth. But how that energy comes about, that's unfathomable. Once something comes to existence, that's within the realm of existence. Existence is finite. So the human being, if you're at a certain level, we have a capacity that we're able to understand what exists. So even spirituality that exists within the world that exists, it's a spiritual realm, but it's a creative spiritual realm. And anything which is within creation, the human being having a soul, having relevance to spirituality, has a capacity, if he's sufficiently developed, to be able to process and do the analysis on that based on the givens which God shared with us. But anything which preceded that moment, that's not fathomable, because that's like understanding God. And God being absolute in his infinite context, it's not fathomable. So now we speak about evaluation. We speak about the order of creation. Now, there's a famous word which I mentioned in the name of Rabbeinu Bachya, who's a contemporary, who's a student of Nachmanides. He writes that if a person wants to have a home built for him, to accommodate his personal needs, so what does he do? He hires an architect who he feels could actually design that kind of structure. And after the design, the blueprint is created, after speaking to the person, how many bedrooms, what's contained within that structure, the outer part of the house, he gives it over to a contractor, a credible contractor who's able to take that, what's on paper, and turn it into reality. Now, so the person understands he has to purchase a piece of land. That's first and foremost. And now he has the blueprint. He has to hire an architect. He has to hire a contractor. A contractor who has the ability to actually actualize that blueprint into reality. So all this that's taking place before it's completed, project's completed, who's it for? It's for the person who commissioned the architect, the contractor, and all the suppliers. The objective is what? That the end result should be a home, a residence, to accommodate all the needs of that occupier. The one who's the resident who's going to occupy that residence, that domicile. Now, now that it's completed, now the contractor calls the one who commissioned him, says, it's ready to move in, turnkey. You just come, you just walk in, everything's in place. Even the pantry is filled with food, the refrigerator, the freezer, everything is get to go. Now the question is, if he's paying the bill and underwriting everything, and it's for his purpose, you should call him that he should be there while the project is being developed. Now the question is, he's not the contractor, he's not the builder. What are you wasting his time? When everything's ready to go, you call him. It's turnkey, move in. That Adam was created at the end of creation. What does that say? All the other species was created in order. There was water, let the waters gather and let the dry land be seen. Let there be light. Let there be vegetation. Let there be species. Let there be domesticated, undomesticated, fish, whatever it's there. After everything's in place on the sixth day of creation, domesticated, undomesticated, with enough grazing lands to satisfy all the species of existence. And there's a garden with every conceivable type of species of fruit to be able to sustain the human being that God will create. That's the Garden of Eden. Every tree was permitted to him except one tree of knowledge. So all those species of fruit trees were created for who? But ultimately, the person we're going to bring into this existence. So that God brought Adam and created him the last creation. What does that say about Adam? Everything that preceded him was only for him, because to have him created immediately and be non-functional or have no relevance to anything, he has no value. He only starts taking value when he's able to actualize his potential, his choice. Until then, what's the point? So that Adam is at the end of creation tells us that he is the center of creation. He's the purpose of creation. Okay? So although how things happen, the energies and how they manifest themselves and the order, we could understand. Why, as I'm just explaining, why was Adam the last, not the first? Is he the equivalent of the animal? Well, you have no right to kill an unintelligible animal. You have no right. Why are you better than him? I'm better than him because God, when he created the world, was creating the world to accommodate whatever my needs may be. Proof of the pudding, I was held for last, that everything should be in place and all the amenities that I need to accommodate my function and my potential, they're in place. That's a confirmation of the reality of what my value is. I mentioned the statement in the Mishnah that Adam was the only species that was created as a single species. There was no counterpart, there was no mate. Then God says it's not good for man to be all by himself. I will create for him a helpmate, and a mate to assist him. Why was Adam initially created as a single person and only afterwards? And every other living species has a male and a female, has a counterpart. Why? It's because there's a takeaway. Everything has a takeaway. When Adam was created, there's the most intelligent human being who ever walked the face of the earth. He's God's handiwork. Pure, not tinged with any level of impurity. He has a level of clarity as an angel. And he looks at this world and he sees the vastness and he sees the opportunity, he sees its value. And he says, it's unbelievable what the level of mission I have. God had to create a whole world to address my mission. Therefore, I can't waste a moment. I'd be fully invested, because if you need a world to accommodate me as a single person, you can imagine the dimension and the extent of that mission and responsibility I have. That's why God created, and then subsequently created a counterpart, the female. The takeaway is, B'shvili nivra olam. The world was created for me. And the way to see it's right, not to live high on the hog. The world was created for me to use it as a means to facilitate the end, the objective, which is meet challenges and become spiritualized and recognize God and be fully invested in God. That's B'shvili nivra olam. The world was created for me. That's the takeaway. There's a takeaway from every nuance of existence. We can understand that. If you're a prophet, you can understand how the energies are converted into material, into physicality. But how the energies come about and why this energy is this or that only God knows. As only God knows the makeup of a soul. And God presents the challenges for each soul because of its uniqueness to be able to address whatever the means. I'll give you an example. You have a house built for a couple that's 75 and above. It's built differently than you build for a young person. You have to have a ramp. You have to have certain support bars. The person shouldn't fall. With showers. It's built for what? For a person to the eventuality. It's level. It's not multi-storied because the person can't walk steps. The young person, you have multi-storied. You don't need all these additional safeguards. It's why? Because it's age appropriate. For one person, no, it's a different type of reality. The world is man appropriate. Everything in existence is there to accommodate man's need. We may have a question, what do I need it for? No, it's like one time they said, the tonsils were only a leftover from evolution. So therefore, in the 50s, every child, when he reached 3-4 years old, had his tonsils taken out. Only later did they realize, maybe 50 years later, 40 years later, in the 80s or the 90s, no, the tonsils have value. Whatever it is, bacteria, it absorbs certain things to prevent certain illness, whatever it may be, or the thymus gland. What's the thymus gland? It's a leftover from evolution. When they started to do vasectomies, to what? So people who wanted to be, or a woman having her tubes tied, that you shouldn't conceive, they thought they could always reverse it afterwards. Can't reverse it. Doesn't work. And they felt there were certain consequences of doing this kind of vasectomy, when it manifests itself in high blood pressure, whatever it was, or heart disease, the person became susceptible to other things. When the body functions as God created the body functions as one entity. The moment you start tampering with the body, you never know what the consequences of that tampering may be. Many years ago, we had a person who belonged to Yad Avram. He was an ophthalmologist. His name was Walter Weitzner. He's a member of KJ. He was a brother-in-law of Sandy Eisenstadt. Very fine man. He was a Talmud Chacham, very fine person. And he was in his mid-70s, early 70s. Passed away, he must have been in his early 80s. And there was a whole procedure in those years that came out in the, let's say, 90s, that if a person was nearsighted, they were able to do a procedure on the eye that for nearsighted people, they could see without glasses. So I asked him, not that I was going to have the procedure because I'm nearsighted. I said, what do you think about it? He says, something, the procedure hasn't been there long enough to see the long-term effect of that. The moment you tamper with the eye, and although you're like drawing it in, and therefore you're able to see further, and you're not affected by the nearsightedness, but you never know, in 10 years, that tampering may cause certain elasticity in the eye, and God forbid, it could lead to blindness. You never know. The procedure hasn't been around long enough to have that extensive amount of time to evaluate. Is it only for the moment? Moment means only for a few years, but ultimately it's going to be disastrous, or no? It's really the right medical procedure to address this problem. That's what he told me. He says, I would advise you not to do it. Not that I was asking him I should. Understand? There's certain things, unless you know, you don't know. And certain things, unless it's proven, you don't know. Certain things can't be proven. You can't, there's no analysis. Why is this person poor and this person rich? Why is this person brilliant, this person ordinary intelligence? Everything has to do with its reflection of the makeup of the person's soul, because he needs that advanced intelligence to address his challenges of whatever the challenges the soul may have. But why does he have those challenges? Why does he have different challenges? There's no laboratory we can make such an evaluation to understand what the needs are, and therefore those challenges have to be put in place to be able to perfect and develop that aspect of the person's spirituality. That we don't understand. But after things coming into being, the tefillin, the tzitzis, dietary laws, eating matzah on Pesach, the sukkah, once it's in, we understand its value. This generates positive energy. That positive energy enhances our spirituality. But how did that energy come about? Where did it emanate from? Well, it emanated from God. Well, could we really break it down to understand exactly how? That you don't understand how. What it is that you could understand. How you have to absorb it that you could understand. But its origin, traced to its origin, the origin is God. And just as you don't understand God, because he's unfathomable, you're not able to understand the various processes which he put into place to understand how things came about only from one point going forward. Give you an example. Person is a pastry chef, right? I don't think Bob's one of those. He's culinary, not pastry, okay? He doesn't deal with flaky dough. He doesn't deal with flakes. No flaky dough, okay? Okay? So this person, one of a kind of a baker. So he said, by the way, the wheat, when it's planted, do you know what kind of seed they put in the ground? He says, realize, I'm not the farmer who plants the seed. Do you know how it's milled? I'm not part of that process. I get that bag of flour and it says on it, whatever wheat, white flour, with brand, without brand, quality. I know that's kind of flour I have to use when I apply my skills in baking. Anything before that, I have no idea, understand what that is. That's not my field. That's for the farmer, for the horticulturist. Well, that's done in the lab in Cornell, because they have a school of agriculture, how to do the various crossbreeding of different species, different types of grains that you plant on an acre. One time you could only have a 100 bushel yield. Now you can have 1,000 bushel yield, because they tampered with the engineering of that seed. The baker's barely is not even literate, can't even read. About all he can read is maybe he hears audibly, he hears the recipe. That's how he knows how to make the cake. Can't even read it off a card. Especially if the cookbook's in Chinese. Can't read Chinese. So he has to get an interpreter. It's the same thing. The things were shut down. We have no relevance to understand. But from one point going forward, we're fully endowed that we could process it and absorb it and internalize it and live our lives by that.